Hi, and welcome back to Dr. Core's Curriculum Explainers. Today I'm going to be talking about testing again, but I'm going to be talking specifically about something that we refer to as norming. Not that guy. Norming is what we have when we create a bell curve. So with a bell curve, 50% are over that statistical average and 50% are below. So now what we're doing with that is we're trying to get an idea of where in relation to each other do certain groups fit. Now in the PISA, that might be at a national level, or in some jurisdictions like Canada, where we norm across provinces as well. You can see how provinces stack up against this norm. Now, the statistical norm in the PISA exam is around 500 points, and that varies a little bit depending on the year of the exam. But generally speaking, you can think of 500 points as the average. Those who score above that 500 are performing above average relative to everyone else. Those who score below it are scored uh, below average compared to everyone else. Now, with a norm-based test versus a criterion-based test, you have different outcomes. Now, let me talk for a minute about a criterion-based test. Criterion-based testing is one in which you have a particular bar, and for each section, each test, you're looking to see how many students will cross that bar, that threshold, based on a criterion that you set in place. So you can think of it as a kind of high jump. Um, Everyone starts at a basic level, and then it's raised a specific amount higher than that. But they don't take the averages. Now, with a norm-based exam, you have a bell curve. So your rating depends on everybody else's rating. So your score, if it were a criterion-based exam, could be the same or even going up. But if others are going up faster than you, in this case, we can think about the 4 Chinese districts that are tested in. Then what you have is you have the appearance of falling scores. Not because your scores fell, but because others performed more highly on it, which pushes the average, pushes you closer to the average than the outlying scores. Now, there's a lot of critics of these exams, not just PISA, but other standardized exams, such as the SATs, because of the ways in which the norms are created or manipulated to give the impression of objectivity even while the methodology itself is biased. Let me start with the SAT. A lot has been written about it and the racist roots of the test creation, which uses something called biserial approach to testing questions. Now, you don't have to worry about the vocabulary, but what that means is what they're looking at is looking at the group that tends to score the highest, um, and then doing test questions, pre-test questions to test the questions out. And when that group scores poorly on them, they're thrown out. Because they want good alignment between those who generally score highest and those who and those questions that they tend to get right. The problem being is the people who were taking that test and who were scoring well were generally white, affluent, and male. And so when they continue that practice, what happens is that you get a continual bias to white, affluent, men who, who are scoring higher on that exam. And the questions where African Americans or women or immigrants from various places score better on than the norm group, and the norm group scores poorly on, they get discarded. Some recent research on that showed that that more than 200 test questions were submitted in which African Americans scored higher on the SATs than the norm group, white affluent males. None of them made it onto the scored test. So there's an inherent bias that works against people of color and helps people who look like me. Now, the PISA norms are similarly problematic, not because of the bias in how they've created the questions, but in who gets tested and where. For one example, China's recent results have dramatically shot up. Now, part of that is a culture of teacher respect and affluence in these major cities in which more than 80% of Chinese kids have private tutors. But part of this too is that they restrict which regions, which provinces or jurisdictions can be tested in. And recently, between 2015 and the 2018 tests, they changed one of their jurisdictions. So the top performing group on the PISA exams is the China BSJZ, which is focused on Beijing, Shanghai, Jiangsu, and Zhejiang. And apologies if my pronunciation is wrong. Now, prior to that, Zhejiang was not included, but rather Guangdong province. When those specific jurisdictional scores were not released, but there was a significant jump between 2015 and 2018 by 6 standard deviations. A 6 standard deviation jump is far beyond a statistical anomaly. It is something that raises big question marks for statisticians. The 3 takeaways I want you to walk away from this video with are that 1, the PISA exam and the score that we are given year to year or every 3 years is not reflective of our actual performance benchmarked to our previous performance. 2, instead, it is linked to the norm, which is placed on a bell curve and adjusted. So if other jurisdictions, especially poor performing jurisdictions, are improving in their performance, then it appears that we are sliding backwards towards the norm, giving the appearance that our scores are declining. Third, that there may be some shenanigans occurring, and we can see from how China has shifted which jurisdictions can be counted that there may be some skewing in a direction that makes it appear that Canada's scores are declining more than they are, even in relation to this norm-based reference.